Hello, family and friends. Many of you have asked for or expecting weekly updates on Felicity's NICU journey. It's really hard to write up and keep up on social media posts and personal messages. So I'm going to be making a series of videos to keep everyone updated on Felicity's development and growth and what it's like as a preemie father. Before I give an update in the next videos after this one, I'm going to just first lay out the story of Felicity's conception through to her birth. I think it's a good story to tell. Before I get into that, I just want to thank everyone for their prayers and their support. It's been a very highly stressful time for our family. Almost insane what we went through this week, but we're in a good place and there's light to strive towards. Also, I'm not in my current office as I usually am when I make videos like this. I'm in the Walden House, the cute little hotel right next to the hospital, and they offer highly discounted daily rates for families suffering with a loved one who is sick. So that's where we're going to be staying for the next 2 months, is here. So, Felicity's birth. Start with the conception first and how this all kind of began. Laura and I were married almost 3 years ago. This upcoming Wednesday will be our third year anniversary, April 8th. We've tried to have kids for the last probably about 2 years. We tried to have kids on a child unsuccessfully. It's more like a year and a half for me. 2 years Lauren's been trying. 1 year and a half I've been trying. Anyways, so we've had many failures and we're trying to figure out why we're not able to conceive, and the researching on the internet, trying to diagnose. We actually saw many different doctors, all giving us different advice until we kind of landed on a good fertility specialist out in Spokane, who actually finally gave Lauren a proper diagnosis. And so we're able to proceed from there. And there's several options when it comes to trying to conceive. Not going to get too into the technical language, but there's one option where there's the injection shot in your leg, and it helps the woman's body release eggs if the body's holding onto them and not releasing them for during ovulation. There is that. And so that was going to be the route we were going to go, or we did go. Most affordable and most natural in comparison to the other option, which would be IVF. Now, keep in mind, this is very, very emotional because it does affect one's mental health when you are struggling to conceive. Many parents, not maybe many couples who struggle to have a baby, who struggles fertility, understand the unspoken grief, the unspoken, unrecognized loss that you have. There's an emptiness that you aren't able to fill in your life when you struggle. And it's hard to communicate that with other people because it's a grief that they just can't see. It's a weight. It's a hollowness in your soul. So we were excited about this procedure, this process, and to cover their bases, though, they wanted a sperm analysis from me, the husband. So no big deal. I can offer that. Not a problem. It's done. They said, we'll get all these labs set up, scheduled, and squared away, and we'll give you a call back, and then we'll proceed with this process. We get a call a few days later, and they say, Lauren, your husband, Caden, not good news. Low sperm count, like very low, like in the 4 millions when it should be 12 to 16 million. And the motility's bad. It means little swimmers have little bent tails, not going to swim that well. So what they told us was without IVF, it would be impossible to conceive. We would need to do the IVF route. But Lauren was insistent. She didn't buy it. I was distraught. Something when you're a man, you think you're all macho and strong, and then someone tells you your swimmers kind of are wimpy. It is a sucker punch to your ego, to your identity. And I did get depressed. I did spiral pretty pretty low for a bit because had to come to grips that hey, I'm not going to be a biological father. Likely not going to happen. Maybe God did not design me to be a father. You think about those questions a lot when you are diagnosed with something of that sort. But Lauren was persistent. She was the stable, persistent, enduring one through this journey, and she wanted to try it anyways. She wanted to go forward. She didn't believe the doctor's diagnosis, and she still believed that there was hope. Me being someone who's more analytical and I like to look at the data and think in terms of statistics, I said that's not possible. But I went through with it mostly to make my wife happy, or momentarily. I knew it was probably going to be crushing in the long run. But in the short term, I said, okay, we'll give it a shot. Now, 4 million compared to the 12 to 16 million range a man should be in. Yeah, there's some environmental factors, but that's typically a biological indicator. Something's wrong with the genetics. Something is keeping you low. You can change environmental things, but that's just too wide of an error to change, or too wide of a gulf to bridge with the environmental. But nonetheless, I did decide to sleep better, get more sleep in the meantime, change my underwear, because I heard that's a thing. I was wearing the spandex athletic underwear, but I changed to cotton underwear. Very uncomfortable boxers. Gotta do what you gotta do. And tweaked up my diet a little better to promote male fertility or male motility. And so we did it. We went for that shot, and lo and behold, a few weeks later, Lauren finds out she's pregnant. And I didn't believe it. I don't believe those pregnancy tests. You start to, when you want so bad to be pregnant, you start to see lines on the tests that aren't really there. And you're like, no, it's not real. Don't want to crush your hopes. So I made Lauren get like 3 tests and get a lab done. And it was confirmed she was actually pregnant. We were going to be expecting a child 9 months later. So it was a very joyful time. And when you first conceive, when you've been on that long journey, struggling to have a child, it is a joyful time. Very daunting at the same time. And I remember being a man who likes to keep himself on the ground. I mean, I'm a man of faith, and I'm also a dreamer and a romantic in many regards. But I've learned through some hard lessons in life never to ignore the data, never to ignore reality, objective measures, empirical measures, and never to be foolish enough to think you're above it. And so that's conflicting within me. And while I was wrestling with that, a scripture came to mind, because I am a man of faith and do believe in miracles, never forgetting that nature, in order to be commanded, must be obeyed. So always being aware of the facts. And so this scripture came to mind. It's from First Nephi. It's a Book of Mormon scripture, and I did grow up in a Mormon household. Not LDS anymore, but those stories stay true to me, and I do have a copy of the Book of Mormon and a copy of the Covenant of Christ. It's a modern English version of the Book of Mormon that I read quite often. Still very much a part of my religious worldview. And kind of the framework behind the scriptural passage is that because of political upheaval, religious corruption, and some culture wars going on in 600 BCE in Jerusalem between the Deuteronomists corrupting religious texts and the religion family decides that they're going to leave that religious order, leave that city, and they're very revelatory in their religion and their religious practice. And the father of that group, his name is Lehi, receives a vision that he needs to leave Jerusalem to the promised land. But in order to get to that promised land, which is America, they have to go through many trials in the wilderness. And a lot of the trials, if you read First Nephi, parallel the struggles and trials that the children of Israel go through when they're in their exodus out of Egypt. So that story is kind of frames a lot of my understanding. And this passage from that story came to me. And here's how it goes. This is a promise made to Nephi as he's struggling to understand the trials that they're going through. And this is what the Lord says to Nephi. And I will also be your light in the wilderness, and I will prepare the way before you. If it so be that ye shall keep my commandments, wherefore, insomuch as ye shall keep my commandments, ye shall be led towards the promised land. And ye shall know that it is by me that you are led. Yea, and the Lord said also that after ye have arrived to the promised land, ye shall know that I, the Lord, am God, and that I, the Lord, did deliver you from destruction. Yea, that I did bring you out of the land of Jerusalem. So I knew in that moment when that scripture came to me last summer, or last fall, so it was September, that we discovered we were pregnant, that because I was defying the odds, our situation was defying the statistics. That this wasn't Lauren and I's doing, this was God's doing. That God was delivering us. It was by Him that we are led, and I knew in that moment that the rest of this pregnancy we were going to go through trials where that was going to be made so. I knew that implicitly, that I was going to be set to the task of a hard journey, but it was going to be worth it because I would have that knowledge at the end that His hand was in all things, through the trials that we would undergo. And so I've always had this sense of, I have a sense of responsibility for my family and for our marriage and for our daughter's birth. But along with that, there is this deep sense of, it's not mine. It belongs to God. I am a steward of this. I am in relationship. I'm merely a participant in this journey. And these trials that I'm going to undergo is going to really prove the point that it is beyond my full capacity to be able to successfully execute, that I'm going to need some help outside of me, which is God. So November. So we conceived in September, and then in November, the week before Thanksgiving, really hard things happened in the first trimester. I remember we thought we miscarried. Lauren comes crying out of the bedroom, severe cramps, discharging blood. It's one of the most, as a first time pregnancy, that's like a horrible thing to happen because you don't know what's going on. You think mom's trying to get rid of the fetus, and so many things just as a husband just flash through your mind. You don't even know how to comfort her, how to help her. All you can do is say, let's go to the ER. So I got her in the car and we drive to the Kootenai Hospital, 40 minutes away, to get to the hospital that I believe has a better ER, more equipped to handle these types of things. And I remember we were telling all the nursing staff in the ER about the situation, and they were all talking about Lauren's pregnancy in the past tense. And that was really disheartening because they all referred to her as, you were pregnant. How long did you carry this baby, this fetus for? It was all past tense language. And so we were already feeling very, very defeated. And I remember they did the ultrasound, and it was our second ultrasound. We had one before, a few weeks earlier, but this is our second ultrasound. And we were worried, we were terrified when they roll out the ultrasound. Oh, what are we going to see on the ultrasound? Are we going to see a little baby kicking, or is it going to be a stillborn, a fetus that's not moving? And we got in there and they pulled up the ultrasound. They were trying to find the baby. And there we saw her, about 12 weeks old, or less than 12 weeks. I think it was like 10 weeks. We can see her moving. You can see her heartbeat, and we can see her very little legs kicking. And I remember in that moment thinking, 5 minutes in mortality are more precious than all prior eternities of pre-life. Only here can you demonstrate the faith from which creation itself was born. I knew in that moment, seeing a little baby on the ultrasound, that little precious life, even though that life was not a flourishing human being walking on two legs on the earth and interacting with, you know, paying a mortgage, buying a house, going to school, all the things you do in life. That life, even 5 minutes of mortality, even in the womb, has a higher premium, is worth more, is more precious to God, than all prior eternities. Because there's something here about life that just makes this whole experience deeply precious. And so that feeling I had in the ultrasound room was overwhelming gratitude that as a father, even if Felicity wasn't going to make it to full term, if she wasn't going to make it past the first trimester, that Lauren and I were still participant in giving something precious, a life. And so the feeling I had was gratitude that I was just able to participate. We worked so hard to even conceive, but I was just grateful that we were able to at least have this precious soul with us in the womb. And then we got the report afterwards from the ER doc, and the ER doc practically said we were gonna miscarriage. It was just a matter of time. And that made Lauren go completely distraught. So as a husband, this is an important role, I believe, as a husband, is to kind of keep the level head and to not get overly emotional. It's good to have feelings, but times like these, you have to keep your head above water. And actually, I have to thank Peterson Academy for this and the courses they've offered to help me think logically and critically about certain things, because it really comes to the forefront in situations like these. I had to push the doctor on where he was getting his information. And I dug it and I asked questions. And you got to know how to ask these types of questions. He had like 3 studies and they were very vague. And the terminology describing this, what we had was a subchorionic hematoma, which is bleeding in the womb. And it is dangerous, but it depends on how big it is. The studies that he was reading from, because he had his laptop or his computer pulled up, it was significantly large. And I asked, what does significantly large mean? When should we be concerned? He did not know how to define his terms. He did not know how to quantify what was actually deemed as significant. He couldn't actually give me a quantifiable measure. He jumped the gun on that. And he wasn't, doctors are great, but ER doctors, they're not specialized. And they're not trained for those particular things. And so it's why it's good to learn how to ask questions, to learn to critically assess the data, and to see how this broad statistic from this imperfect sampling, data of sampling, will transfer to your particular situation. So Lauren's distraught, and this is like 3:00 in the morning. This is all happening. And they discharged us with that information, but we finally got our OBGYN on the phone. And I never believed it once, because the data just didn't line up. So we got Lauren's OBGYN on the phone at like 3:00 in the morning, and she reassured us, "Oh, I see these all the time. You're going to be fine. We're just going to monitor." So, the thing to note as a father in the fertility journey with your wife's pregnancy is to learn to think critically, learn to ask good questions, learn to read the scientific literature to know when there's a flaw in reasoning, when there's a inductive leap that someone is making that doesn't actually correspond with your situation. All of those things, and yeah, they use big scary medical jargon. You just have to learn it. It's not so scary once you learn the language, once you have the knowledge to aid you to cut through that, and there is power and confidence in knowledge. So 3 days later, this is right before Thanksgiving. This is where it gets really rough. And it's not my story to tell, but this story did frame in a way, gave the rest of the pregnancy a very, very anxiety driven, scary kind of tone. So at the same time, Lauren and I conceived. My sister and her husband also conceived, um, and this was their first time ever conceiving. So we had the same conception date, and so we were projected to have the same due date. Both were going to be daughters. But 3 days after we had that scare, my sister Candace, she had the miscarriage. I was actually the one to drive her and her husband to the ER, and I was there through that whole ordeal. And it was traumatic for them, especially. Very depressing. Just a inconsolable loss. There was so much hope, so much excitement for, to raise two girl daughters on our same homestead property in close proximity, to have that shared life. And we thought for sure, this was divinely appointed. And we still can't quite comprehend that loss. Why should that happen? Candace was healthy and Jacob was healthy, her husband, but we experienced a loss, and I can still hear the wailing and the grief and sorrow and the suffering. Can't take that away. And that's not my full story to tell, that's their story. But that did occur so closely with our miscarriage scare, and that did color the whole pregnancy in a very ominous and treacherous light. Now, one would hope that after a scary first trimester, that you would get over it, and the rest of the trimester, the rest of the pregnancy, it'll be a breeze. And that's what we kept telling ourselves. Okay, we got through this hurdle. Next 2 trimesters, gonna be better. First trimester is the worst morning sickness. Second trimester will be better, and we'll just coast through this. We got to the hard part. It was not the case. Second trimester. So Lauren was placed on. It was originally every other week checkups. You usually only get 2 ultrasounds in your whole pregnancy. We were getting ultrasounds every other week, initially because of the subchorionic hematoma, but it was also because we eventually had fetal growth restriction. That means the placenta isn't delivering the nutrients to the baby, something with the umbilical cord, and the baby isn't growing fast enough. Our daughter in the second trimester, the whole time, was in the 9th percentile of size, of being small, which puts it under a critical pregnancy. That bumped Lauren up to weekly checkups with ultrasounds. And because the baby's small, when the baby's small, there's a lot of complications that could occur, whether the baby will develop well. And so the whole second trimester, it was weekly visits. Everything was a scare. One time, Lauren slipped on the ice, had a fall, and she was bleeding again. And we were terrified of that. We had to get checked up for that. Just constant checking out, going to the doctors, praying really hard that our baby would move out of the 9th percentile. And she didn't the whole second trimester. She was always in that 9th percentile, not growing much, growing very slowly. And we were very, very worried. And then as we approached, and then there was potential hole in the heart as well. which we eventually we believe it got resolved. We went with a cardiologist in Spokane later down the road, and he says, "Yeah, I think we're going to be okay." Well, they're doing the cardiogram. They did one today on her actually. Today she was born a few days ago, so we're just going to verify. But that seems to be okay now. But during that second trimester, this was all during Christmas and New Year, a lot of stress, a lot of just constant worry. And then the third trimester was where things really turned. In that third trimester, Felicity grew. And, within a matter of weeks, in the third trimester, Felicity went from the 9th percentile and jumped up to the 40th percentile in growth. Huge leap. And percentiles, the way that statistics work for percentiles is it means that she is bigger than, of all babies, she ranks this. So if someone in percentiles, if someone is in the 90th percentile, they're in the top of all data points. They are greater than 90%. So when babies in ninth percentile of size, that means on a distribution curve, she is well out of the average range. There's only like 9% of babies are going to be smaller than her. So she's critical. She is well below average. And getting out of that distribution, out of the ends of the distribution curve to the middle part. So what you want to do is it's really hard to jump out of that when you were stuck in there because you have to overcome a huge data set. But within a matter of weeks, she managed to jump from the 9th. She went from 9 to 10.2. So after you're above 10%, it's no longer critical. And then she spiked to the 40th percentile and was projected by the due date to be coming out at the 60th percentile. So she was actually going to be above the average size of a baby, or above the exact middle. So right around the average, which was actually quite remarkable given her fetal growth restriction. But while this occurred, this did take a massive effect on Lauren's body during this last couple months in the third trimester. Lauren did have a kidney infection. Her kidneys start to fail, and she was in the hospital for several days. And there was just trying to figure out what it was in the first place. She's suffering and probably the worst pain of her life. As if you've had a kidney infection or past kidney stones, people say it's as worse as pregnancy, birth. It's up there in pain. Poor girl, poor woman just had to experience that. And then leading up to this last week, the preeclampsia. Just she went from preeclampsia risk to preeclampsia. And I believe it was through this growth spurt that Felicity went through. And what happened was Lauren was at work one day, felt like she got hit in the face with a baseball bat, how she describes it. And she could not think straight. The intense migraines, no medication would get rid of it, just constant. And we got some hard narcotics. The first time I went to the hospital, I was able to get rid of it for a few days, but then it came back with a vengeance and would not subside without intervention. And that's what landed us in the hospital last week. And I'm incredibly proud of my wife, Lauren, for her faithfulness, persevering, and loving kindness. From initially trying to conceive all the way up till the C-section. We spent the entire last week in the hospital as Lauren was very ill from preeclampsia. We fought hard to stabilize her symptoms to keep the baby, Felicity, naturally gestating as long as possible. However, the symptoms would not subside, and it turned into Lauren's hell week, the pinnacle of pain in this pregnancy's uphill battle. She did not want a preterm birth. Both of us were and still are terrified of what it would require of us to raise a preemie. And so she fought until all other options were exhausted. And she fought for like 4 days, trying every sort of medication every sort of even natural remedy trying to get rid of these symptoms to lower them. Nothing was given. Then we tried after that to do an induction to induce labor. That was the next second best option. Nothing was working. And so we finally had to say, okay, it's time for a C-section, which occurred on Lauren's birthday, was a C-section date. Lauren went the distance. The extent to which a mother will go to sacrifice her own life for her child is awe-inspiring and humbling. She gave it her absolute all, and despite reaching her limits, she was always so kind, more concerned about the welfare of others, and more distressed that she was causing an inconvenience to those around her. I know that when I'm in pain or fail to meet my expectations, I become mean and couldn't care less about other people's feelings. Lauren, on the other hand, is the complete opposite and my better half in situations like this. Her charity has never failed through any of these trials. If the angels were watching and intervening in our lives over the past 7 months, it is her faith and righteousness, not mine, that got the attention of heaven's miracles. I'm so proud of Lauren. She's already doing much better. She's still in pain from the surgery, but each day she makes strides. We've already have been discharged from the hospital, and she was actually able to hold Felicity for the first time yesterday for Easter. All right. So I remember prepping Lauren for the C-section, and we had prayer right before she went in to go under into the surgery room, just thanking God for this beautiful opportunity to participate in this gift of life, because it is a gift. It is a miracle when we participate, that we have been granted that from God to be participants in life, in childbearing and child rearing. So I was able to be present in the OR room during the C-section, and so was Lauren. They do a spinal tap where they make your lower part of your body fall asleep so they can cut you open. And Lauren was awake, not watching the procedure because there's a curtain they have, so just her head's poking out, and she was able to watch it, see the baby, hear the baby for the first time, and the sound a baby first makes when they take their first breath of life. You might say they become a living soul. Their umbilical cord has been, cut, and they are breathing in that first breath. They are now full participants of life in a way. Taking that first breath is a beautiful, sort of transcendent thing that occurs. Very special. And her Felicity's voice, because she's a preemie, was very high pitched. She sounded like a little goat or a little pig. Really cute. Was not expecting that. And I remember being there with Lauren and just the joy that washed over us. And then I followed our baby out. They allowed me to cut a piece of the umbilical cord off. I think it was a symbolic thing. They just called me over, even though it was already cut. And I cut some more. That was kind of cool. And poor Lauren is getting the short end of the stick on all these. I'm having this great time, experiencing these many firsts. I was even the first to give the milk to the baby. Typically a role reserved for mothers, when they breastfeed, but you can't breastfeed a preemie because they can't handle the milk, but you can take a swab of mother's milk, colostrum, I believe is the medical term, and you can give it to the baby and they'll suck on it. And so the first time Felicity tasted her mother's milk was from me, holding the swab. So we had that very first time, because after the surgery, Lauren had to stay in the hospital room for like 3 days, separated from Felicity, and so I was going in between the NICU and Lauren's room, taking care of both my wife and the baby in the other room. So I was stretched, but I got a lot of the very first with Felicity. While Lauren, on the other hand, is getting cut up and suffering and just getting the short end of the stick. And what happened in the OR room is something happened with the lower drugs, and she started feeling everything, and it was really hurt. It hurt like hell. But then they knocked her out just like that, and then she woke up, and her arms are strapped to the OR table because she apparently was in pain and was moving around. So that can occur. Didn't traumatize her or anything. She's tough and wasn't too shooken up about that, but got over, and she's recovered really well. By the way, just an amazing medical staff at Kootenai Hospital. Just absolute kindness. I was so blown away by how kind everyone was, how well people remember us. It was her birthday, and they came in when they gave her the meds. All the nurses bought her gifts. They didn't have to do that. They made Lauren's birthday incredibly special. The whole experience was incredibly special. And they've just been absolutely kind, and I'm just overwhelmed by. I did not like hospitals. Called myself after that traumatic experience in the first trimester when I went to the ER. I never want to come back here again. But after my experience with this C-section birth and so far with the NICU, I kind of like hospitals and don't mind hanging out here longer. I'm kind of liking it. Used to work in a hospital myself, and part of me wants to go back to it. So that is Felicity's birth story, from conception to the C-section birth. Conceived September 9th, 2025. Was born into this world April 2nd, 2026. She now shares a birthday, or has stolen the spotlight of her Mother's Day for herself. And so I think it's very special that Lauren and Felicity share that same birthday. Two most precious women in my life are born on the same day, share that same special day. Makes celebration a little easier for me. Yeah, and so through all of this, that scripture of you will know that it is by me you are delivered, that you will know that I am your God. And you know that through the trials, you have that deep, say that the faith is forged through the flames of adversity. And you come to that deep, deep understanding of your dependence and your reliance on God. It only comes about, I believe, through trials, through suffering, and not suffering that is self-imposed out of your own foolishness, although that does occur because we are weak and feeble, but suffering from a sense of love, a source of conviction, a suffering that kind of that proves that God is true to his promises, that reality itself is not absurd, but is structured, is coherent, and is loving, and it cares for you. And you come to that deep knowledge by going through it, by taking that Kierkegaardian leap of faith into the absurd, not blissfully blind and ignorant to what you're about to go through, but with your eyes wide open, fully embracing with good cheer and courage the trials that the flames of adversity that you have been called to walk through. And you come to know in those flames who your God is, what it is you serve. And I'm not claiming I've come to an enlightened knowledge through this, but that I can see the invisible hand of God, the felicitous hand of the divine in the small and simple things through this journey, through this story, that he is there, that he is holding us, sustaining us in the palm of his hands, that he's preserving our family. For what purposes, I know not, but I'm just grateful. That's another thing I've learned too about gratitude in this journey. Grateful to be an instrument in his hands, to participate in this beautiful gift of life, and to help facilitate Felicity's mortality, her existence, her experience of life. that is now my role as a father. I have felt that mighty change of heart that comes about when you have your first kid and you realize the world has completely shifted. And now I have a new relationship with reality, a new coupling with existence. I'm a different type of agent in this arena of existence. So that's kind of that drives that fuels me with a new sense of purpose. Um, Definitely reorients all my priorities, and I believe that this next 2 months it's only going to forge that bond between my daughter and I. I think it's kind of special, as I mentioned how earlier I was the first to, give her a taste of her mother's milk, but it was through me. The next 2 months, a lot of huge developmental landmarks or milestones occur that will occur typically in the womb, but now they're occurring in the NICU with me there playing a hands-on role. And so, in a way, I get to experience, um, not obviously not fully, and I'm not down. What mothers do is incredible, and it's more. Obviously, it's ideal. She ought to be in the womb still, but I get to be a participant in those developmental stages, and so that's why this video was a lot more narrative in structure. I explained the story of our conception to birth and God's felicitous hand in Felicity's birth. Next following videos will probably be a lot more technical, as I'm trying my best to educate myself, get good information about preterm development. I have a lot of books coming in the mail on this very subject. This is going to be the sole focus of my intellectual pursuits for the next 2 months. Kind of necessary given my daughter's development is at stake here, and I want to make sure she's on the best footing for life. And so many of my ongoing videos won't be less narrative in structure, but will consist of more scientific, my understanding of the science of what I'm learning from the doctors and the books I'm reading on preemie development and the stories and how they apply. And so there'll be a lot more technical neuroscience language because I'm really interested in the brain development of Felicity. So I'm going to be really researching that tremendous as much as I can, balancing all the craziness. And so those will be the updates in the weeks to come. But I thank you for listening, and I think my heart is full of gratitude to the Covenant Christian community for all their love and support, for Peterson Academy, the students there who just completely just showered my family with support and prayers and love. Such a great community to have there. The education there is top notch, and there's something about knowing how to think and to think clearly. It's not just a mere intellectual pursuit that you do as a hobby, but when shit hits the fan in life and you're bombarded with all this information you have to think through in a hospital setting and you're stressed and tired, having that clear mind to be able to think critically and rationally and objectively is a great tool to have in situations like what I just went through this week. And so I also thank the curriculum of Peterson Academy as well for fortifying my mind for such chaos. The love, the love, support, and the community has been an arc for us through all of this. And then, of course, the hospital staff, incredibly kind. Just they really took care of us well through all of this. Deep gratitude to them. So thank you for listening. Stay tuned. I'll be posting weekly updates as we go through Felicity's NICU journey. Thank you.